This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am your host, Steve Gould. I lost my voice there. Thank you for joining us, guys. Thank you for always showing up. Thank you for all the ratings and reviews you've been giving me. Thank you. Right up top, I want to thank you guys for supporting the show financially. It's really cool, and I want to do roll call here. I want to read the people who are supporting the show, keeping the lights on here. Jacob Ruth, Amanda Powell, Carmen East, Rich Emery, William James Long of William James Long Investigation, Sarah Varnoff, Samantha Harper, the great Gary Steiner will be returning, by the way, Richard Wilson, Scott O'Donnell, David Diaz, the magnificent David Diaz, Timothy Wright. Thank you so much. Couldn't do it without you guys. It's so nice to be able to do this, and not to pay all the bills myself and do it for free. So I appreciate that, you guys. This is episode number 70. This is a really good one, guys. I think you're going to dig it. We're going to get into police reform a little bit, and someone who's kind of worked in that a lot and kind of has a mechanism, some software, some technology that's going to help police reform in the country in a way that makes sense, not the police reform we hear screaming in the streets from angry mobs. We all know that's just pure emotion. That's not going to work. What they want done doesn't make sense. But this guy, Rahul Sidhu, I had him tell me his name twice because I'm that bad. But he was on Redondo Beach. He still is. He's a reserve now, but he was on Redondo Beach in California. And he also, before that, was Fire and EMS in Pittsburgh. So without further ado, let me bring him on. He has a company called Spidr Tech. So we're gonna get some stories out of him, and then I want to hear how he's helping to do this police reform, because I'm all ears, because from what I hear in the news and what they're trying to do, I just don't make sense. So without further ado, here he is. Sir, welcome to the podcast.
Steve, thanks for having me, man.
My pleasure, brother. So Redondo Beach seems like, is this the police department where the chief has drone footage of him surfing on his website?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Chief Coffin. He's a good dude. He loves surfing. It's one of his ways that he enjoys kind of keeping his mind on and off the job, but connecting with the community, because Redondo Beach, we definitely have a surf community out here.
Dude, seems like an awesome guy. I worked LAPD backgrounds, and I had someone who applied there as well. So I was like, let me look at their website to see like where they are and like where they get their address, and because you have to go there and view the files. And I get on there, I'm like, geez, their chief is a pretty young dude, and I know it's kind of a busy little city. So before I know it, I'm watching drone footage of him surfing, and I'm like, wow, he's the guy you want to be chief. It seems like he grew up there. He's a surfer. He understands his community, and he seems kind of like he was kicking butt.
Yeah, and his dad was a Redondo Beach police officer, back in the day. He grew up in the community. He started at Hawthorne Police, so, it was a little bit different between Hawthorne and Redondo Beach, and he came out to Redondo. I mean, he's a youthful-looking guy, but, he's got his experience. He's very wise. He knows what he's doing, and if you go into his office, you'll see he's a big skater. He's a surfer. He connects with the youth just as much as he connects with the rest of the community, but he does a good job.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's something in California that was hard to get used to. Those sports, surfing, even like BMXing, skateboarding, that's really ingrained in the culture here. Like one of the guys I interviewed for the podcast, actually, Rob McCreary, was on Pomona, and he had a crazy career, shootouts and whatever. But there's pictures of him from like the 80s. He was a sponsored BMX biker. He was like one of the guys you'd see on, like MTV or whatever. I'm like, damn, man, that's pretty awesome. So that's cool, man. Yeah. So does the chief drag you out there to surf? Does he have surfing buddies? Like if you surf, are you going to become lieutenant?
I haven't gotten surfing with him. I have a good story though. Like he was the president of the LA County Chiefs Police Association for a period of time, and he invited me out to go speak at. They had a conference in Palm Springs, and he was the one putting it all together. And I was like, okay, yeah, he gave me a speaking spot, and wow. I was looking into who else spoke. He brought a keynote speaker. Now, keep in mind, everybody in the audience is all just police chiefs from LA County and some Orange County, and even I think there was even some San Diego in the mix. But so it's just an audience full of police chiefs. So he had a surprise keynote speaker. His keynote speaker was Rodney Mullen, who is like one of the most famous skaters of all time, invented street skating, basically. Wow. When I grew up in LA, I was kind of a skater too. So I enjoyed that kind of thing. And Rodney was one of my favorites. Like he used to be a character on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, like in the sequels. And I used to use Rodney Mullen.
Really? I played that in college, dude. No kidding.
Yeah. When I was growing up, I was like high school or something like that. I mean, I was playing that game quite a bit, and he was one of my favorite skaters. So having him come and speak right after me, I was like, what a weird moment. But when he was speaking, I remember he was he was showing this awesome video of him like just doing these tricks, and he was like explaining each trick to the Chiefs. And I'm looking back at the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are like, what is happening right now? And the guy was just like, yeah, this one here is like a 360, and then you kick flip, and then it's a dark side slide all the way down the railing. But then he tied it all together at the end, talking about like innovation and connecting with the community, and it actually really ended up working. But it was just such an interesting dynamic, and that's classic Chief Kaufman.
That's cool, man. This guy sounds really awesome. And how old is he? Is he in his 40s, or is he just in his 50s but looks like pretty young?
I don't want to guess because I don't want to get it wrong.
All right, yeah, you're still reserved.
Young. Yeah, he looks like he's a young looking dude.
Totally, absolutely. All right, brother. Let's before we get into Spidr Tech a little bit and the police reform stuff, can you tell us about your first hot call? And I know this is just the kind of call you went on the first time, and you kind of like your heart was in your throat, and you were like, it could be anything. So feel free to take this from your police side, your EMS side, both, combination, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I'll do a little bit of both. I had the advantage of having experienced what it feels like to respond to a 911 call and be the person in charge before I became a cop. I was a paramedic out in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County. And, I just got out of paramedic school. I barely worked as an EMT. I mean, I was doing like ride along shifts and some clinicals and stuff. But basically the moment I was minted as a paramedic, I got through FTO. It was just me and my partner, my EMT at the time. And that was it. And I remember the first shift coming out of FTO, my partner, his name was Mark. He was an older guy, probably late 40s, had been doing this for decades, just saw me as this young, early 20s kid who's technically calling the shots because he's the medic and my partner's EMT. But it was just very much like they have in the military. You have like that, like the butter bar second lieutenant comes out, and then they have to, walk around with the sergeant, like the master sergeant trying to figure things out, yep. Or staff sergeant, whatever it is. That's what it felt like. So we get to a call, and it's like a triple traffic collision with a rollover. And as soon as we get there, I'm like, oh shit. As soon as we get there, I walk out, I assess the scene. I'm trying to get an understanding. And Mark walks up to me. He's like, so what do you want to do? And I look at him, and I'm just like, we have like 4 patients I'm trying to figure out. I'm like, fuck, Mark, I don't know. What do you want to do? And that was like the first moment. He's like, I got this. Because he knew I just wasn't ready to start making calls. And that moment, I was really humbling because with Mark, he wasn't, he's trying to help me out, but he's also, we gotta solve this massive issue. My adrenaline's pumping. He knows I've got deer in the headlights type situation going on. He guided me through it. But then ever since that moment, I remember the rest of my career there, I was trying to prove to Mark that I could figure this shit out. With other, like my next partner, I was just constantly going, yeah, I can be the man on scene. That was like the moment I was like, I can't ever look to Mark and go, I don't know how, I can't have that look in my eyes that I don't know what I'm doing. So I remember having that when it was my first call as a cop on FTO. I was rolling around. We had a graveyard shift back then, which was like a bunch of FTOs on that shift, all like really solid FTOs, a lot of experience. And I remember rolling to a call for a bar fight. And as soon as we get there, my TO and I hadn't really spoken much. And as soon as we get there, I'm reading the notes in the call. The notes describe some guy who's hostile. He's wearing like a red shirt. He's walking out. And I remember we got there, and one of the FTOs pulls the beanbag shotgun out. Click, click. You hear that rack. They're not even saying anything to each other. They're just walking in with tactical telepathy. And I'm going sitting going, what's the plan, guys? Like in my head, I'm trying to figure that out. And I see this red shirt guy walk by, and I'm like, that's the guy. So again, first call as a cop, I go, hey man, stop. And I'm like what's your name? Stop. And I'm trying to stop this guy. And my TO all but grabs me by the collar. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, who cares about this guy? We got to go into the bar and see what's going on. And in my head, I'm going, but I found the guy. Like, that's the guy. I think that's the bad guy. And, we get into the bar, we figure it out. The guy's leaving. he's gone. The scenario has like solved itself, and there's like no real assault. Nobody wants a report. And I was about to make it so much more complicated, just being a straight boot coming out of the car, thinking I'm doing a good job. And it was adrenaline, but it was also like frustration because I think I'm doing a good job until later I found out I would have completely screwed that call up. And that was another humbling moment where, hey, take a seat, learn for a bit before you start thinking you know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We all go through that, and those are painful too. Because I have memories like that, and like I almost turn pink when I remember them. You know what I mean? You just feel like kind of embarrassed, like,
oh yeah.
But that's what I
Cringe
mean.
Moment.
That look in the eye, the deer in the headlight look in your eye. Like I can remember going to like a first like really big crash where there was people all over the place injured, and just being like, and then someone just being like, go shut down the highway at that street, and being like so thankful that some senior patrolman was like, go do this. I was like, yes, sir. Because I was
absolutely
like, there's people
whatever you want
lying everywhere. I'm like, there's people coming out of their homes to help them. It's like, what the? Yeah, it takes a while. I mean, that is tough. I mean, they put a lot of emphasis on training in police academy because it's important, because it becomes like muscle memory and can save your life. But earning and experience, getting that saltiness over a few years is that's when people make it or they don't. That's when people go, I don't like this career, I'm going to leave, or they decide to keep their foot in it. You know what I mean? So
yeah. And it's like, when you're new, and then, in the beginning, you're just going, someone tell me what to do. I'm happy to do it. I'm just happy to be here. And then over time, you start getting some experience. And I've seen this plenty of times with other cops where you get some experience and you're like, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing. And now I want to do it only my way. And now all of a sudden you got a little too much bravado, a little too much ego, a little too much pride going on. And then, you have to get humbled again several years in. And then you're like actually a vet, and you're like, okay, now I can be in charge if they need me to be. I can be a team player if they needed me. I'm happy to do whatever the team needs me to be and bring my experience to it. But it's always like too little. It's too little in the beginning, too much in the middle, and then you find that balance, I think, towards the end.
Absolutely, yeah. It's funny when you get a few years in, and you find yourself being senior on a call and being like, wow, I'm doing it. Like, it's okay. Like it's not, this would have killed me 2 years ago, but, no, that's so true. Can you describe to us a strange or bizarre thing you dealt with?
Yeah. I mean, plenty of bizarre, strange things. There have been moments in both my policing and paramedic career where I've learned two things. Number one, the concept of adulthood when I was a child just doesn't match. Like what I thought adults would do and how they were, like that's what you really see when you're a paramedic or a cop. You go out there into the wild and you go, how did you fuck this up? Like how did this scenario even end up being? Who are the adults that made these decisions that arrived at this conclusion? This is where we are. I've seen that, but I would say actually the most bizarre things I've seen is it's like stuff that, it's actually sad. It's stuff that parents have done with their kids, or people entrusted with children. That's where it gets like really bizarre. Like how did this, like what was broken that you thought this was the case? And I'd actually see again, a little bit more on the paramedic side where I've seen some like avoidable, I mean, this isn't funny. It's just avoidable deaths by children or really bad injuries where I'm just like, what's going on in your head, like to the parents. And you feel bad because sometimes they're mistakes. But I've also responded to calls where, it was a murder, of a child. And you're trying to understand what the person could have thought, like trying to empathize. And I don't mean that in the sense of like sympathize, but like really trying to understand what's going on in this person's head where they killed this child.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a parent, how could you have done that to your own kid? That's the stuff that I will always stick with me as some of the strangest and most bizarre. I've seen plenty of like in at least in the time, both as a police officer and a paramedic, plenty of like bizarre, kind of weird, funny, like crazy person type things that you just kind of write off as this is just another day on the job. But the stuff that really sticks with you is that.
Absolutely. Yeah. There, like you're saying, you try to put yourself, you can't help yourself, but to try to put yourself in their headspace, and how, like, you can't, because we're sane and don't have those problems, we can't connect the dots to getting down the road to where they went. But, a really really like interesting, I want to say, stream of thought I had once was when Howard Stern had a child molester on the air. And, no one wants to hear from a child molester. It's like the worst thing. You just assume they just drag him out back and kill him, that type of thing. But this guy, the catch was this guy was a child molester that had not committed any child molestation. He's been fighting the urge his whole life.
Oh, okay.
And it was like, what? And then he just said, like, I am attracted to children. Like I'm also attracted to like hot women. And it was like you're just, it's like so awful. But then you can't help but go, damn, how is your mind programmed like that? Like what an awful, awful fate you have that is hardwired.
You know what, man? That's actually that's an interesting point, because I would be so curious talking to somebody like that. Like if you're a child molester who's never molested a child, you just have this. It's essentially at that level. It's like you've got this like mental illness you're dealing with, or something that's just wired in your brain differently that is now driving you to do this thing. Very bold of that person to go, hey, like publicly admit I have a problem, and like I have to resist this urge. I can't imagine anyone would do that, because it's such like a scarlet letter that you have to wear the moment you admit it, even if you haven't done it before. It's just like, hey, no, you're this person. Like this is your identity now, and nobody's comfortable having you around. No, just to be like, yeah, I'm that person. Not having to have ever admitted it is like kind of like that by itself. Like I'm curious why they even did that. Good for them for at least admitting that. I mean, that's the best outcome we as a society can ask for, is like, like anybody who's going to prey on our children, identify themselves, and we can, if we can help them not do that, we'll do that. Right. Yeah. Because if it's not illegal, it's not like the solution is we put them in jail or we shoot them in the head. Like there's something that has to happen to prevent that bad thing from happening. Now I'm just curious.
Yeah. Like it's almost like this guy should like start some kind of clinic or something. Like how have you done it? Like, how have you not, like, it was just a weird mind space to get into. And I don't know, you kind of led me down that path when you're thinking about like people who do horrible things to their kids. Cause it's like, we can't get there, so it baffles our minds. But that was one time that really just kind of threw me for a tailspin, where I was like, oh man, it would, I didn't accomplish anything by it, but I definitely had a different perspective,
I'll say this is like less bizarre probably to cops, especially in cops in like the state of California and some other states. But for people who aren't listening, I do have a story that will sound bizarre to them if they don't understand the current, like, what's going on in policing today. I had a call. This is about a year ago now. When my partner and I were basically responding to a theft that had just occurred, shoplifting from a major store. The guy, was described. He was walking, I think it was like last seen walking northbound on Hawthorne, and like it was just, he was carrying a bunch of jeans. Like he just stole jeans. That was just a bunch of jeans. And, eventually caught up with him several blocks up. I think we're in Lawndale now. And I saw him at the bus stop. There's a guy, matching description, holding on, like he's got like 7 or 8 pairs of jeans. He just got them sitting on his lap, waiting to get on the bus.
Was he from the Soviet Union or something? He's got all these jeans.
No, you'd think so. No, and we jam him up. I'm like, hey man, take a seat. Like move here, move away from all your stuff, move to the curb. Politely having this conversation with him. We know he's the guy. He's claiming, like, why did we stop him? He's pulling all the cards. And we're telling him, no, look, we stopped you because you matched the description of someone who just took 7 or 8 pairs of jeans, and you're holding 7 or 8 pairs of jeans. Right. So, that's, and once he's like, okay, well, the jig is up. He's like, all right. He starts being compliant. He's like, can you just write me my ticket? Let me go. A lot of people don't realize this, but like, people play the game. In California, we had a couple laws that get passed that make it a lot easier for people to basically commit thefts that are not at a felony level and not have to see, any type of real accelerating punishment if they're a repeat offender. So
it's almost like cash bail. Like you just give him a ticket and it's not even like
basically. So I search him. I find he's got a ticket from Beverly Hills in his pocket for theft. He's got a ticket from Manhattan Beach in his pocket for theft, like a bunch of these tickets. And I'm like, dude, you just keep getting these tickets. Like, what do you, he's like, I know. I'm like, are you gonna go to court? He's like, no. He had warrants for all of them. And he's like, I'm just like having a no bullshit conversation. We're just like being kind of friendly to each other. And I'm just like, so what's the deal? He's like, dude, I just like, as long as it's under $950, which is like the threshold for felony in California, Like, I'll hit a couple stores when I need the money, and then I'll go to the Rhodium, which is like the swap meet they have in in Gardena, and I'll sell them. and that's how I make the cash. And he's like, because the warrants don't really tip over a certain scale. And especially in 2020, and this was actually before, I think it was before, coronavirus really hit. Especially in 2020, it was like, we're just going to write you a ticket, man. Like, we got overcrowding. This doesn't pass the threshold. We're going to write you another ticket that says, hey, please come to court. And as an officer, if they have a bunch of like reasons that they have to go to the hospital, like, medical issues, whatever their illnesses are, then, you're going to just tie up an officer for several hours waiting for this person to get approved by a doctor to go to county. County is going to take him. And then,
and they love it. They want to go to the hospital.
Yeah, exactly. So he knows this, and that's the game. So, he's like, the risk and reward for him is like high reward, very low risk, and he's just going to continue doing it. There was a proposition on the ballot, a few months ago that was supposed to correct for this particular issue, and a couple other small issues where, people are just taking advantage of the system, but it failed. So Gene's guy is the story I tell people when I'm explaining, like, when it comes to reform, like, we have to find a balance because, I asked him, like, hey, look, if you were able to get a job, like, would you get a job? He's like, look, man, I put a couple hours into this. Like, this is pretty good. This guy is making a couple $1,000s, at least a few $1,000s a month just doing this. What's the incentive?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's that risk reward thing. When I was in police academy, they had a drug expert come in, and he talked about. I'm getting some feedback a little bit. Is that from your side or mine?
I haven't changed any of the audio. Can we put the headphones on?
Yeah, maybe try the headphones just to see.
Got it.
It was behaving before, but now it's getting a little bit. There we go. Hear me okay?
How's that? That better?
That's great, yeah. So we had a guy come to academy, and he was a drug expert, and he laid out, he goes, let me be completely honest with you. And this was back in early 2000s or 2006 or whenever I went through police academy. And he's like, let me show you a risk reward model. So he did this whole thing out where he's like, the cost of hydroponic stuff, the cost of converting your basement, tapping into your electricity, doing all this stuff. Because he had these people they busted. All this work and money to bust these guys because the laws, even pot laws, them are loosening. The guy made like $15 million on pot in 5 years. Yep. He went to jail for a year. And guess what? They didn't find any of that money. He hid it. So he goes, just in case you're wondering why people are doing this, the risk reward is super high. Like, you can do this for a year and make like $3 million and just stop. Yeah. Or even if you get caught for a year, he goes, you probably do a couple months, 3-4 months, just hide the money. And then when you come out, you're a rich man. I thought, damn, that's insane. Like you said, that's part of the problem.
I like to be clear. I do believe that, poverty plays a role in crime and opportunity crime, property crime, et cetera. Sure. I think that doesn't play a role in all crime. And I think at some point you could point to like white collar crime and say these people are not impoverished, and yet they're still going to do it. If the risk and reward matches up, they're going to take that risk to make a lot of money. Ultimately, it can just be considered the human condition to a certain extent. Pot being a smaller thing that most people don't really care about, but like some of this, there's more severe crimes in which if people feel like the risk is pretty low, they're going to go ahead and take a shot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've never been programmed for that. Obviously I'm a cop, so I'm not I'm not into it, but I would never put myself out there for a big cash reward, Thank goodness.
Yeah. No, I don't buy lottery tickets.
Yeah.
And all the stocks I invest in are, they don't rhyme with GameStop. So my risk appetite's a little lower there.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I go for the whatever they call them, mutual funds, steady mutual funds, steady growth, All right.
Keep my stocks boring.
Exactly. Let me ask you, can you tell us about like the most intense or terrifying moment in either career?
Yeah. On the cop side, man, I think a lot of people, again, not in policing, maybe not even in policing in like a major area. One of the scariest things I think you can deal with as a cop is being vastly outnumbered in a scenario that can turn violent. And I think the first time I ever had an experience with that was early on in FTO when I was full-time, and we were told to disperse a group of like that. We had a restaurant in the city that constantly attracted like known gang members. And they were all gathering in the parking lot, and that's like a powder keg willing to blow. I mean, that's where like if people are tweeting this is where we are, and rival gangs come out and go, we know where they are. Let's just go ahead and shoot in the crowd. Like anything can happen in that scenario. It's not like way after curfew or the time that they're allowed to be in the lot. So I remember there was like 3 of us, and probably like 80 or so, just people in this parking lot that were clearly up to no good. And I remember my FTO goes, "Hey, do you have that like dispersal order slip that you have to read from when you give this dispersal order?" I'm like,
right.
Yeah. And I'm like, so I remember asking him like, "What do we do if they just don't leave?" He's like, "We ask it 1 or 2 more times. And then like, if we slowly have to bring the cavalry in, we will." It's like, if they turn on us, like, what are we going to do? He's like, "You remember the use of force continuum, right? Once you feel like your baton's not, going to save your ass, then you're going to have to start pulling your gun."
Yeah.
And I just remember going, we're going to lose that fight. 100 times out of 100. If it's 80 versus like 3 cops, it doesn't matter how like geared up we are. We're going to lose that fight.
Yeah.
And that's actually like when I talk to correctional officers or deputies who are doing time in the jails, and they're just like, well, the only reason we don't get killed every day is because the prisoners, like the inmates, they allow us to stay alive. Like it's a terrifying thought. It's a terrifying thought. I mean, of course, if something bad happened, everyone there is going to face the consequences, but not until after, people in that position, like the COs and the deputies, might lose their life. So I will say that was the first moment I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty terrifying. Luckily, it didn't go that poorly. The second time I felt that way was in the riots last year. I was mostly doing like looting suppression and stuff like that with a couple other folks that were focused on target areas, in LA and mostly our city. But, I remember there were like maybe 30 or 40 of us congregating, talking about here's a strategy. I'm going, hey, this is a moment where it can go poorly, not just like from a safety standpoint, but where any of us could be thrust into a position where we have to make a decision, likelihood we make a decision and there's 7 camera angles that'll take it out of context. Lose our houses. Like that's another scary thing. So that's definitely the scariest thing. I remember seeing a video of Chicago police last year running like maybe a couple dozen cops running down the street away from an advancing crowd, running away from this crowd of people just like breaking stuff and burning everything, flipping cars, just straight running. And I'm like, I have never seen in the United States cops running from anything like this. And that was just a scary moment for sure.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. That riot patrol, you're on the precipice of complete and total disaster. And especially, what it was like for the riots, after Rodney King. That was totally insane. There was there was so many shootings and people shot and cops shooting people. When I talked to some of the guys that were at those, it was nuts. Like literally you would try to like just like tag people and then and they'd come get picked up later, and then I talked to so many of my friends that I made at backgrounds, and they would go home after their shift, and behind them is just smoke, and they're going to the burbs, and then they come back 8 hours later into the smoke. And it's like, damn, that
I can't imagine places like Seattle and Portland, that maybe Chicago, Atlanta for a period of time was just popping off for months. I mean, at least weeks where cops are getting rotated on, off, and the overtime sounds good until like you've been doing it for so long that you don't care about the money anymore. You've been hurt, like hundreds of cops injured, during that period of time last year, and you just don't want to be one of them. It's bad time.
Imagine the fatigue, like mentally and physically, and then, like you said, you got all these camera angles, like you've been worked to death and you make a bad choice, or you shout at someone or you use a little too much force, boom, career over. You're done. Not only career over, they might come to your house and try to burn it down. They'll go after your wife.
That's it. Yeah.
It's like,
and it's one thing to have mistakes, make the mistakes. It's another thing if you didn't make a mistake, but people are trying to make it seem like you made a mistake.
Right.
And that context is going to, and then by the time people clear it up and find out, oh, no, this was total bullshit. The cop did a reasonable thing. You're already doxxed. Your information's out there. people who are just going to hate you. Now you got to like find a way to move. You got to keep your family safe. There were so many cops last year that were just wrong place, wrong time, didn't do something wrong, but because all cops are bastard, they had to move their families. They had to get their kids out of school. They had to do things about this that just it's a shame. It's hard to find today with the amount of attrition we're having. People that are qualified, that have their heart in the right place, that still want to do this job, that are coming into this job, and we want them to be here, knowing how much worse it is for every cop.
Absolutely. Yeah. I came back to my home state after a 4-year break in service, but I did the catch-up classes, and like every department around is like, certified officer wants to this guy wants to come back. He's got 14 years of experience in law enforcement. It was like, you go wherever you want, because they're just like, they're hurting. And Mass has its own police reform going on right now, and we're getting off pretty light. The big thing they're doing is making Massachusetts post. We're not post. We're like one of 2 states that's not post. We have our own certification. That's crazy to me. It's been a long time coming, because we have this Mass Police Training Council that governs police stuff, but none of it's penal code or law. So it's kind of like, hey, we think you should do your firearms twice a year, one of them being low light. Heavily suggested. We don't have in the budget, so we're going to wait for case law. If we shoot someone, we'll fight it out in court. So it's a long time coming. We got to do post. It's going to cost, they're saying like $30 to $60 million to get us up to speed. And where I am right now, I'm Western Mass, it's all, half the force is reserve. They run shifts alone as police. This is how they run, and they're saying, well, if you want these reserve guys to still exist, we're going to need an additional like 300-400 hours from them to certify them under post as reserves, not even full time, but as reserves. And these guys are plumbers and doctors and whatever, electricians, whatever, teachers. They don't have time to go to this huge academy. Like half of them, like, I've been a cop 20 years. Why do I need to go to this thing? Well, we're being held accountable now. Like, they're getting right down to our time cards.
Yeah. I think as far as reserves go, I think California does a good job with it, because California offers different levels of reserves that can be utilized for different reasons in the way that you're describing too. The highest level is a level 1 reserve. That's someone who's either formerly full-time, has been through full-time academy training, or has done all the same amount or like the same hours of it. So there's no difference in terms of training between a full-time officer and a level 1 reserve. Yeah, they're good to go. Same thing. Level 2s have a little bit less training, but they have to work with other officers, like full-time officers or other level 1 officers, like right next to them in proximity, so they can be utilized in some capacity, but they're not ultimately responsible for a scene or making decisions more often than not. Level 3s are just like, hey, we need you in the department. We need you to be sworn in because you have a specific position. But those are like, that's when you get like the doctor who's going to be augmented to SWAT, or the analyst who's like really good at the computer. Yeah. And those people, some places carry guns, some places don't. It's a little bit more ambiguous, but generally speaking, I'm definitely in favor of reserves, at least in every state. If you're going to have a reserve, have, a full-time equivalent. And if people want to work alone, just like they would be full-time, they have to go through that amount of hours and that training. Because as a reserve officer, I'll tell you, I started full-time. It's a little different, but if I didn't, I wouldn't want full-time cops to treat me differently because they thought, because they've been through more training. That's not something I want either. I'd want to be treated the same.
And that happens too. Like, not so much here where I am in this area, this county, because the guys have been working full-time for so long, but I did most of my career in the eastern part of the state. And, there it's like reserves are, they're whatever. You don't give like your opinion on anything to a full-time guy. Like, you don't, it's like you're not, no one really cares what you have to say, or it's just because it's just understood. The full-time guy has this like almost 1,000-hour police academy where he had someone shout at him and it sucked ass, and he lives it every day. And then you're the guy that did weekends for like 6 months with no military, no paramilitary, no physical activity in Massachusetts for the reserves. So it was like, it was very easy for you to get that little slip. So that's kind of, like you said, there's that disparity there. It's kind of a weird, it only makes sense if you're going to, and they started seeing it years ago, the town attorneys did, the city attorneys, where they're like, wait, you're both certified police, but like so much more training on this guy. Like, it seems like if this guy made the wrong choice, they could just say, why does he have full-time officer duties without the training? Like it's ripe for a lawsuit. It just is.
Yeah. You got to separate training and experience too, because like if you look at the military's got a perfect example. If you want to be an officer, like an OSIDE officer in the military, you can go a bunch of routes to make it happen. Ultimately, you have to, like in the Army or Marines, you got to go through OCS, Officer Candidate School. But to get an opportunity to have a commission, you have some people who go to like Annapolis or West Point, right? 4 years,
right? Just
living it. 4 years, plenty of training. And at the end, they get commissioned. And that's like, okay, what is that? The golden standard. But then you have some folks that will go to college, and while they're in college, they'll go through ROTC, which is like a part-time training to like become an officer. And then they can face a commission there. But then you have folks who just will go, I got a degree, send me to like 10 weeks of OCS, and then I'm going to have the same rank as a person that went to Annapolis or West Point.
Right.
Now that's training. So then you might have like, well, how much have you learned? Where did you come from? You at least have the basics. Everybody goes to the same level, but some people went through a little bit more to get here. But then it's experience, because, if I was going to be a Marine Corps officer, a full-time, and I've got like 4 years of full-time experience, like as a platoon leader, eventually getting to like XO, like doing this whole thing, that's going to be different. I'm going to have so much more experience than the guy that came in as second lieutenant in the reserves for the Marine Corps. And, might get deployed, has combat experience, has all kinds of stuff. It's just the amount of experience is going to be a little different. Now, the amount of like combat experience, like the experience that matters, might be somewhat similar depending on what units they're in and how much they got deployed. The amount of like administrative experience and like experience living the life of like the smaller things might not be valued as much, but it's still a lot more. So if I was like a reserve captain of the Marines versus a full-time captain of the Marines, you're going to have a head nod, kind of situation where that reserve captain, they might have an opinion, they might learn some things. Maybe the full-time can learn a couple things, but generally speaking, it's going to go the other way around. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to lean on the person that's experienced. So even as a reserve now, I know like there are guys here that'll have at full-time that have been full-time for 10 years. They'll have way more patrol experience than I probably will ever have in my life. And I might bring some unique experiences to the environment, but I'm not going to assume that I have more or know how to do something in some capacity better than that person. You just have to have that humility.
Yeah, you got to have that.
They'll put it in you.
Yeah, it definitely behooves anybody getting into it to have a good, they call it like a military bearing, understand how it works and where you stand. It's funny, my buddy's a lifelong Coastie, and his dad retired a Chief Warrant Officer 4 in the Coast Guard. So at Chief Warrant Officer 3, they sent him to like fork and knife school. He became like, like an officer kind of like, but like according to all my friends in the military, the chiefs, they run the military. So because these are the guys that have been there so long with so much experience that they finally become officers, but they'll never be the lieutenant junior grade that just got out of college.
Yeah.
But like we had, when I was with the natural resource officer, we had Woods Hole, and the Woods Hole had a chief and then like a lieutenant commander or lieutenant something or other. And the guys there would be like, yeah, the lieutenant's going to come, lieutenant commander, whatever's going to come down. But he'll just ask the chief what to do, because the chief is the man for the job. And and the lieutenant gets it. He's not going to, they're cordial, and the chief gives them all the respect in the world. And they get that relationship. They're not going to stomp on each other,
Chief Warrant Officer has got to be like the most respected rank in the military. I mean, and I understand the concept. Like, look, you got stars and bars going on your collar. Of course, that's there's respect that goes there. It's ingrained into the culture. But in terms of like this person knows what they're fucking talking about, it's gonna be hard to find somebody who knows what they're talking about more than a Chief Warrant Officer. Yeah,
totally. It's a total asset for anybody above them, for sure. Rahul, I feel like you're gonna be a good guy for this question. Okay. A lot of listeners looking to get into police work, younger people. Can you give some advice to a prospect, or maybe someone who's in academy, or even just a young officer?
Yeah, good question. My answer changes continuously as police work changes, and what makes a good cop changes. And I think people want to be cops. They get a lot of advice. Some people are going to say, don't do it. Sure. And some people are going to say, hey, they're going to give them very like specific technical advice on how to pass an oral or how to pass backgrounds or, what to do. I would say there's two things to keep in mind. Number one, understand what makes a good modern police officer today and be comfortable with that. Not only be comfortable with it, but you have to a certain extent, it's not just acceptance. You have to actually agree with it. You have to go, okay, I understand what my role needs to be. And not just as a cop in the United States, but there's localism at play. Like what does it mean to be for this particular community? Being a cop in Beverly Hills, it's going to be different than being a cop in Detroit. You know, you can't compare the two. Being a cop in the South, it's going to be different than being a cop anywhere else. You know, like, so in that sense, understand what that is, accept it, but be okay, like be interested in that role. Be interested in what it takes to be a modern cop. And I honestly think a lot of what we have in policing, with some problems, we definitely have some problems in policing, are going to be solved over time with new cops making that decision and coming in, because they will be taught how to be good cops. Like the concept of catching bad guys, preventing bad things from happening, the tactical awareness, like those are things that are going to happen for them to get signed off. But that acceptance on the backside is going to be important. The other thing I would say is, I think that one of the most important characteristics for a police officer to have today, and stick with me on this because it's going to sound softer than to cop listeners than it is intended. The most important word is empathy. And I don't just mean that from like empathizing with the person you're putting hooks on. I mean, empathy is going to make you better tactically. If you're going to enter a room, if you're SWAT, you're entering a room and you got to point your gun in a specific direction. Good empathy is going to have you think, where is the bad guy most likely to be right now? And that's the area I'm going to cover. What is my partner going to cover? How is he exposed or she exposed? What is my back exposed to? That's you practicing empathy in a tactical environment. From a detective standpoint, empathy is going to help you lead yourself to the clues that need to be uncovered. Going to help you lead yourself to a good interrogation, good interview process. When you're sitting there interviewing somebody or interrogating somebody, empathy is going to help you pull the right strings to get the information that you actually need. And so it's not just about patrol officers, which I do believe is a big part of modern policing. Going out there and understanding, what does my community actually need from me? What is going to be the outcome that solves the problem that's in front of me? How do I, solve for the bigger picture of how my department is viewed and the perception here, but also help make this a safer, good outcome and ensure that the law is enforced in some capacity? That's also empathy. So feeling comfortable with the definition of empathy and practicing that in all aspects of police work, and then understanding what a modern police officer is today, I think is going to help you not only get hired, but ultimately survive the career and decide if it's for you in the first place.
Great answer, man. I like it. I agree too. It's funny because when I applied to be a police officer in the beginning, had a friend who was on a local force who actually was a card carrying Mensa guy. So smart guy, just loved police work. But he said in the interview, listen, because I had bombed a few interviews, I just was like, I went in there like a cowboy and this, I just like, oh my God, where did these nerves come from? So he's like, listen, he's like, you need to show them that you have empathy. He said, so one thing that I do is, I've said this before. He said something like, while booking somebody, I will, of course, never be derelict to my duty, and I will always do what's required. He said, but because they ask you a weakness, one of my weaknesses is I am a bit empathetic, so I can kind of put myself in their shoes, and I can kind of, feel what they're feeling a little bit, and that can make it difficult sometimes. It's just like he crafted the perfect, this is my weakness answer into like, a total strength.
Yeah.
But it had to do with empathy. But the way you just described empathy was like, is a way I've never thought of it. Like even tactical situation empathy, like, cause you're literally putting yourself in other people's shoes to benefit yourself in situational awareness. That's really smart. I like that. That's really cool. Rahul, I really want to hear more about Spidr Tech. Let me give my understanding to you of what it is, and then you can do all kinds of corrections on me. All right.
You got it, dude.
I got the graphic, this new soft. Look at that. How professional is that, brother? Right above
professional, man. Professional. Look at that.
So anyway, this is fascinating to me because as we were talking about a little bit before the show, private industry is always ahead of public. They seem to be with customer service stuff, with understanding the customer. And because it's driven by dollar bills. So, you know what I mean? So, of course, they want your money. They really have a good understanding. Well, traditionally, police departments don't care about your money. I don't care about your money. Sure. We get our budget every year regardless. We catch bad guys. Nothing affects that. Well, geez, isn't that different now? You know, now your relationship with the community has become currency. And that's something administration should be very interested in. Your software, from what I was reading on your website, mines data they already have and produces useful reports for them, and also can do so much more. It can also reach out to victims and people who have reported, touch back with them, kind of show that, like, we're on this, we're into this. Because so many times I've worked for a few different police departments, big and gigantic being LAPD, and then smaller ones. One thing that really turns the public off is lack of interest in your problem. And I was a victim of this, my man. I had my truck stolen. I went into my local LAPD, the Northeast Division. They could have cared less. I called them on the phone. They're like, we're not coming there. I'm like, what do I do? Come here. I go there. Don't care. What's your plate number? I'm like, I just moved to California and I don't know my plate number. I don't know it off the top of my head. He's like, can't help you. That's can you run my name and date of birth? Or, you know, he didn't want to do a damn thing. This software you have is the exact opposite. You're keeping in contact with people. You're showing people you care, and you're using, I mean, how much information does a police department take in that they don't use? And you're harvesting it for the greater good. I think that's what I understood by it.
Yeah. Honestly, it's pretty astute. I'll give you that. So if you're looking for a job, man, let's talk, because that was a really good pitch.
All right,
like
good.
You know what I'll say is, like, so we're not mining data or harvesting any data. But what you are saying, you know, like, their data that goes to the records management systems and dispatch systems. If someone calls 911, you know, and they're calling from a textable phone number, for example, we know, okay, we can text this person updates for their call. If they're a victim of crime and you know, they're, whatever information they're providing, that can be utilized to help provide them with better customer service. So we're not, like, when I started the company, I thought to myself, look, there are plenty of companies out there that are going out there and helping police departments find more bad guys. It is a saturated market in that sense. What there isn't is what you're saying. There aren't companies out there that are trying to help them utilize this data for other purposes. And when we started this company in 2015, this was just starting to become the trend that, you know, public perception, like you were saying, was currency. And when my first chief hired me, he said, listen, what we have here is a bank of goodwill with the community. And every time you or another officer goes out there and makes a, you know, like, has a nice interaction with somebody, you're making a deposit into that bank account. No matter what, statistically, someone's going to end up making a withdrawal, and we have to hope we have enough in that bank to cash that check. That analogy always stuck with me. Now, I know we were talking about this before the podcast too, but, you know, the other thing I believe is that fundamentally, if you were to ask a police chief 10, 20 years ago what their main performance metric was, they would tell you it's crime rates going up, going down. That's the metric they gauge. Now it's public perception. Crime rates can inform public perception, but the dynamic has shifted. And these departments don't have, you know, a mechanism in place to measure public perception as much as they've had it for decades to measure crime or enforcement stats. So kind of combining those two things, we thought to ourselves, you know, fundamentally, interactions between police employees and the community members that they serve, that's ground zero for pretty much all improvements and declines in public perception. Everything that happens after that is a game of telephone. I can't control for how the media is going to paint a story. I can't control for somebody, you know, going on social media and trying to put something out of context. What I can control for is understanding and optimizing, measuring and optimizing these interactions as much as I possibly can, and trying to provide customer service automatically that rivals that of the private sector. And what I mean by that is, I mean, when's the last time you bought something online, Steve?
I don't know, 3 hours ago.
What'd you buy?
I bought a bore sight for my rifle.
Okay.
A laser.
And I bet you could go onto your, people have heard me make this pitch so many times. I bet you could go onto your like check your email and find out exactly what you bought and your order number and track the status of your order on their website. And that's just what you're used to as a modern consumer.
Oh,
if I bought a pizza on Domino's. Yeah. If I bought a pizza on Domino's, I know that Richard put it in the oven like at 9:23 p.m. If I bought an Uber, I know where the car is. I mean, that part's not going to apply to policing, but I know these things. So consumer expectations for what customer service means and that accountability and transparency at that interaction-based level have slowly grown as technology has improved. And when I order, like a sight for my rifle on the internet, if I'm used to that level of customer service and all of a sudden I've got the worst day of my life, someone just stole my car and I don't even get a small inkling of that style of customer service or something that's vastly more important to me, it's going to be extremely frustrating. In my opinion, the police department's already going to dump right off the bat.
What a terrible contrasting view, huh?
Wow. And the thing is that these, like Amazon, these other companies, there's not some sweet old lady on the other side of this sending out emails and texts, keeping people updated. There's a system in place that understands this person bought this and we need to keep them updated and send them these messages. So similarly, we built a system, the world's first for policing and public safety, where if it ties to the RMS CAD, it sends those types of messages, customer type messages to these customers, 911 callers, crime victims, people who are asking these sheriffs and police departments for assistance. So if I were to call 911 in any of our 50 plus agencies across the continent, the moment, they hang up the phone or, I'm a 911 caller, I hang up the phone, I'm going to get a text message that says, hey, here's what you called 911 about. Here's your 911 call number. Here's what to expect. It's a hit and run. So have your registration and insurance ready when the officer gets there. Or, let's say it's a vehicle burglary. If anything was stolen, have an itemized list of what was stolen. It's preparing them for an interaction with the officer, making them feel like something's going to happen. And then, it'll update them throughout the whole process. An officer leaves. An officer submits a report in the RMS. It's going to send them another message. Hey, here's your report number. Here's what you need to send your insurance company, et cetera, et cetera. Your item has been shipped. It's going to turn into a detective's been assigned. Your item's been delivered as an arrest has been made, or the case has been closed pending further evidence. Here's what we would need to do to open it back up. And by just doing this, what you're doing, there you go. What you're doing is essentially making it less likely that this person's going to call the police department and say, what's going on with my case? Or this person's going to stand up at a city council meeting and saying, the cops don't do something for me. Or this person's going to be on a podcast, X amount of years later saying, I went to the LAPD, they didn't do shit. That's what you want to avoid doing, right? You want to be able to serve your customers at decent level. Now, at the same time.
Oh, believe me, dude, that Amazon, was burned into my mind. That still aggravates me.
And I honestly think.
1-star review in that case.
I think cops don't realize every time we go out there and we have an interaction like that, and you're a cop, and it's still burned into your mind. Imagine not being a cop, not even being empathized with the cop world. It's going to get burned into people's minds. You're creating. You want to go out there and create advocates, supporters, voters. You don't want to go out there and create people who are just going to go, the cops don't do anything anyway, may as well defund them. That's going to be a problem. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is Amazon, all these companies, you're probably going to get a survey at some point for the company you bought that site from that's going to ask you how you feel about the site, right? And how you felt about the service. Every service organization in the world, at least in the private sector, is constantly trying to evaluate how they're doing. You can't improve how you're doing typically until you can really measure it and get a sense of what works and what doesn't work. Otherwise, it's just straight anecdotal. It just doesn't fit. So the idea of measuring these interactions by sending out surveys and going, hey, how this interaction go? Do we meet your expectations? If not, go ahead and let us know why. It's not just about identifying liabilities, because I can tell you, when you're sitting there, you're deployed to the riots, officers are going looking at each other going, which one of us is going to be the guy that creates the riots in our city? Like, they'll have that thought. That's not the part that's actually interesting to me. The part that's interesting to me is the fact that when you can actually positively reward officers for going out there and having these good interactions, you're going to change the way they do the job. That's ultimately what you want to do, right? You want cops to go out there and be nice. But if the only measurement that they're being held to is enforcement statistics that are being gathered, how many stops, how many cites, how many arrests, then that's the kind of cop you're going to get. The moment you start getting, here's how many positive service responses this person had. If you're going to tell them, hey, go out there and pick your stops better, don't have to arrest everybody you see. You got to go out there and be a modern cop. They have to have modern cop statistics that they can actually utilize and go out for promotion on. So it's not like, hey, this guy's not doing anything. People love this guy in the community. That needs to be something that's gathered. Every department we've deployed to was kind of worried, oh, we're going to get all these complaints. Every single time, it is vastly surprising to them how many compliments they get. And now they're just constantly using positive reinforcements, attaboys, attagirls. and cops are going out there and they're just having a better time with the community, and the community's loving it. They're not just getting a better service, but they're just getting cops who are out there getting rewarded for being nice.
Wow. That's really cool, man. So what is the type of, like, so far, I mean, 50 agencies is awesome, but what kind of cities and towns or counties even are doing this? Is it like Beverly Hills types, like people who have, like, a pretty plush budget, or is it more just chiefs that are very concerned with, like, or getting ahead of it? They're kind of like, this looks smart. Why don't we do this and stop the problem before it starts?
I would say, just like anything when it comes to innovation in like an older sector, your early adopters are going to be the ones that already have a key eye on, or a keen sense is what I'm trying to say of how to solve problems. They want to keep solving problems. They want to be the first adopting a solution. They want to be innovators by nature. My agency, Redondo, is the first paying customer for our product. And Chief Kaufman's he's got that. He's an innovator. He's a leader. That's our motto. We are the community leading the way in law enforcement. So he holds us to that standard. And so that's something that happens. But now at 50 plus agencies, Steve, we're all over the place. It's diverse. You'd think, oh, maybe it's just a California thing. Yeah, we got plenty of agencies in California, but we're in Texas, Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Wisconsin, wow, Washington, Florida, Virginia, and we're in Canada. I mean, we're it's not geographically specific to one area. We have large cities like San Antonio Police in Texas, Tucson, Arizona, Seattle, agencies like that. We have small departments of like 20 something cops. We have county sheriff's departments. We have police departments, municipal. We have high crime agencies. We have low crime agencies, because the low crime agency is going to want to do it because, of course, it's a great customer service. The high crime agency is going to want to do it to save money, to allocate, resources to better improve patrol presence. All of this gets affected. If you were going to, for example, send a text message to somebody who might have been waiting on the side of the road for a hit and run for 15 minutes, you send them a text saying, hey, we apologize for the delay. An officer's en route, but if you're no longer there, please click here and let us know, so that they do click there, so the officer doesn't drive across the city, right, and now they're compounding. So the return on investment here is different depending on what you need. But
you charge by how large the city is, like how many officers? Is there like a sliding scale for rates?
Yeah. So sworn size, we try to keep the fees simple. We got into this industry and we told ourselves we're not going to be, one of those companies that's just like nickel and diming everybody and like surprise bills are coming out of the woodworks.
Oh, Chiefs hate that anyways.
Yeah. Oh, they hate it. It's hard to budget for, and then you don't know what you're going to get. But we get an upfront fee that's usually very nominal to deploy it, and then it's an annual subscription based on how much the platform you want to use and the size of the sworn size of the department. That's it. No other fees.
And can it just to geek out a little bit, like we have IMC. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. That's Massachusetts. IMCs dominates the agencies.
Sure.
Pretty much any platform can you guys take a look at, and you have programmers that can kind of curtail it to any software? Or?
Yes. I mean, look, we integrate mostly with like the records management, the dispatch, case management software. The cops that are listening to this, I mean, that's the stuff you're interacting with every day. We've integrated with dozens of providers, all like the top ones that you've heard. We've done integration with. Occasionally we'll still find one we haven't worked with, but we have a whole deployment team. Our team isn't just filled with engineers. Like our lead deployment, one of our deployment engineers is also a reserve officer. All of our customer success, managers are former police officers or current reserve officers. Two of the co-founders of the company are former full-time, now reserve officers. So we've got that built into the core DNA of the company. We understand, how to work with these systems, and not just on a technical level, but how to non-technically implement them in a way that's actually going to be adopted by the department. There are plenty of people out there that'll build software, but don't know what it's like to be a cop. And that software doesn't really go anywhere. And that's what we're trying to avoid too.
That's perfect, man. You're a cop yourself, and you have cops working for you to deploy and design the stuff. That seems pretty bulletproof to me.
It works out. You got to have a balanced perspective.
That's awesome, brother. It sounds awesome. I'm going to chew your ear a little bit off the air about that software, because it really seems effective, and I hope more places pick it up. But I really appreciate you giving me your time. You're telling us some stories and coming on and chatting for a little bit, man.
You got it, man. Anytime.
All right,
Thanks,
brother.
man. Appreciate it.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to end the podcast. Like I said, the video is kind of new, but if you just hold on the line for a second,
You got it.
I'll get us done. All right. Hey guys, thank you for joining us. If you want to do me a favor, rate and review the podcast, go ahead and go to iTunes and do that. That's the most effective place to do that. Go to thingspolicec.com and apply to be a guest. That would be great. I'm always looking for more guests. If you want to buy some merch, that's there. Also, if you want to donate and support the show, even $1 is so appreciated. Thank you. Thank you for the monthly subscribers. That's really amazing. And most importantly, if you want to get a hold of Rahul Sidhu, our guest for today, I would say just go to Spidr Tech. Go to his website. If you just Google Spidr Tech, SPIDR, let me put it up here. You're interested in his software like I am. It sounds pretty awesome and seems pretty needed seems like it can really help with a lot of the problems we're having. That's why it was so interesting to me. Go to Spidr Tech, drop him a line and see what he can do for you. It sounds like it's pretty affordable. Goes by agency size, so get a hold of him that way. And in the show notes, I'll list his website and any other contact info he wants you guys to have so you can reach out to him. So, guys, thank you so much for joining me for another episode. I really appreciate it. And as long as I keep getting guests, I'm going to keep them coming. I appreciate you guys and catch you next time.